UBT's Action Line Podcast is a production of UBT Media. Welcome to UBT's Action Line Podcast, brought to you by Sweet Patina. I am so pumped you're here. I got to tell you that this new podcast series is something that's pretty close to me, pretty special to me, and something we've been working on for over the last few months. It's really been something that's been in my head since we started United by Truck. So this podcast, I've got some notes here. I'm going to, read off of those since I get to actually do that now, since this is a podcast. Our new podcast series focuses on my love for classic trucks, deep dives into the personal history of those who share that same passion as I do. 6772 C10 history brought to you by Auto Metal Direct. More in this episode on that. And the occasional UBT crew roundtable for some good old shenanigans and laughs. I'm so excited that today's guest is Trevor Evans. Trevor's a good-natured, fun-having classic truck guy that we have had a relationship with for quite a while. We finally got him down here to shoot a What's in My Driveway, which is a segment on this channel where we profile other people's trucks. But as a part of the What's in My Driveway segment, we had him come over and sit down and do an interview, a podcast interview right here in the studio at UBT Media, and I'm super stoked for you guys to hear this conversation today. And hey, if you're looking for patina care products like patina sauce or century polish or happy ending quick detailer, which is a personal favorite of mine to use on my patina trucks, or even some professional quality products like matte clear or even satin black acrylic urethane, look no further than sweetpatina.com. They've got everything you need there to take care of your patina truck or for you to build a slick paint truck. And they've even got awesome merch. So head over to sweetpatina.com. Use the code UBT5 for a discount at checkout. Now, let's jump into our interview with Trevor Evans. Trevor, thanks for being here, man. What a morning we've already had, right?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
What have we been up to this morning?
Just a what's in your driveway, hanging out, talking about the truck, and we got to do a little bit of ripping at the end. So
we did.
That's what I enjoy.
Yeah, it was awesome, man. I love your truck so much for the reason that it is, like we talked about in the video, budget build, down and dirty. You kind of it's evolved with you over the last
right.
12, 13 years.
Right. Yes, sir.
Since 2012. And I think that is super, super cool. The budget build piece of it is something I think a lot of us can relate to, especially I think you said you're 33, I'm 41, so I got a couple years on you, but not from a wise factor. I mean, you have
right.
You really seem to learn how to kind of figure this out early on.
Yeah.
And I think probably what I learned in that, us talking this morning on the What's in My Driveway segment is that a lot of you learned some of that from your dad, or you learned some of that from just growing up around hot rods.
That's right.
You want to give us a little bit of taste of what growing up was like? Tell everybody where you're from.
Yeah, so I am from Cumming, Georgia. I've grown up there, went to school there, my whole life. I grew up in the same house my whole life. We never did move. We had, an old farmhouse, kind of like what you were saying earlier, a one-story house. My family grew up there. That's where my mom was actually born, stuff like that. So my mom got to enjoy that place her whole life. I lived there until I was 18. I moved out. I actually moved into my grandmother's old home place. Whenever she passed when I was younger, she left it to me. And so whenever I finally turned 18, and it was like 2 days after I graduated high school, I was like, all right, I'm out of here. Yeah. And so, kicking myself a little bit. I wish I'd spent a little bit more time at home, but the growing experience was there. That, and even my grandmother's house, it's 1.2 miles away from my parents' house. So, I was real close to home. I didn't really go far away. And, growing up, I was my parents were very serious about school. I did okay. I was pretty smart. I graduated with like 3.8, 3.9 GPA. I got by. Test taking just came kind of easy to me. Studying was not easy. That's where I struggled.
Totally.
And so, I learned at a young age that I've got to be hands-on. If I'm not physically doing something that's teaching me where I'm going, I'm probably not going to remember it. And so that's the way that I took on, building cars, building trucks, stuff like that. And I jumped into construction with my dad. My dad, he's done construction his whole life. So when I jumped in, I was probably, 12, 13. I was like, I gotta make some kind of money. I want cars too.
Yeah.
So, but growing up, like we had mentioned in the video before, my dad was a drag racer. He came from a drag racing background. And to go kind of further than that, both of my grandparents on his side, so my dad's mother and father both retired from General Motors.
Wow.
My grandmother was the first lady on the assembly line at GM. And so it is.
Wait, hold on. Your grandmother was the first lady on the assembly line at GM.
That's right.
Wow.
Pretty neat.
Do you know what year or time frame that was in?
I don't, but I do have her GM card, like her little employee card. So, I've tried to do as much research as I can. They keep that stuff pretty locked down.
Dude, that's so crazy, though.
It is, yeah. She was over the parts department, stuff like that. So whenever that she came into the new version of it, it was really cool because they kept all the ladies in the office because let's just be honest, they're more organized than we are.
Oh, 100%.
And so
that's why my wife's sitting here right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. And so, it was just kind of one of those things. And I drive GM trucks because, and my dad told me this, my grandparents passed when I was young, but he said, whenever he was growing up, he bought an old Ranger, something like that. And he pulled up and his dad said, that's not going to work. And he said, what do you mean? It's just a truck. And he said they told him that GM put food on that table, and that's what's going to get him to and from wherever he's going.
Oh, I love it.
And so, it was born into me. Not that I'm a Chevy guy or anything like that. It was literally bred into me.
Yeah.
So, but I learned at a young age that if I'm not hands-on and physically doing a portion of it, I'm not learning it. Reading through the book, doing stuff like that, I struggle with it. And so, I'm a slow reader. It doesn't register. It takes me a few times to read something. But if I do something, there's a solid chance I can do it again and not have to worry about it.
Dude, that's cool.
Yes.
How do you think that has helped you when it comes to automotive stuff? How do you think it's helped you with cars and trucks? Because we're going to get into your list of cars that you've had, trucks that you have now. But, I mean, you've been doing this all your life.
I have. Yeah. So whenever that I was growing up, I watched my dad work on his drag car, right? The front end is a fiberglass front end, IROC Camaro. So the front end comes off, he gets in the engine compartment. You can literally dive right in and get whatever you need to. Well, I learned whenever I got a 69 Nova, and I learned real quick that you don't just work on something and pull the front end off of it. Yeah. I also learned real quick I'm not a body guy. Pulling those panels off ain't as easy as what they look like.
Not for me either.
And so, I kind of, directed focus on mechanical stuff. I loved patina even when I was a kid. The ratty looking vehicles in the parking lot are what I was like a fly on one of those traps.
Yeah, fly trap.
I was attracted to it. I mean, I love patina. I love factory paint.
Yeah, I often say that I will walk over a $200,000 slick paint truck to look at the $30,000, $25,000 rusty holes in the floor, holes in the rocker, maybe even holes in the bedside kind of truck.
You better believe it.
Yeah.
And so, I learned that when I was working on my Nova, we were building it to be pretty nice. It had a 502. It was tubbed. It had a narrowed rear end. My dad was smart. We put a roll cage in it. We did all floor pans, stuff like that. It was turning out to be a really nice car. We had some real snug leather racing seats. I say leather. That we didn't spend all the money on it, but we were prepping it for paint and all that stuff. And the week before we were supposed to paint my car, I was 16. Our shop got struck by lightning, and it burned up my Nova, a couple of my dad's cars. We had a paint booth in there. My brother actually paints cars. And so when we were gearing up, like I had done all the body work. My brother had helped me with it. My dad had pushed me and like, hey, let's get this done. And when lightning struck our shop, you got the paint booth in there. You got all your tools. You got all the gasoline from the drag car. I mean, you got all this stuff in that shop.
Things you don't even know you have.
Oh my gosh, and that stuff's explosive. Yeah. And so we did everything we could. But by the time that we got down to the shop, when lightning struck it struck in the middle. And when it did, it took over all the electrical, and it turned to instant fire. Well, it was a wooden shop, and so it spread faster than what we could even get down there. And by the time we got the door open, there was nothing we could do.
Man.
So we lost.
And you said this was right before you turned 16.
I was 16.
Okay.
Yep. It was the summer after I turned 16. So, that was a little bit of a struggle. Lost my first car. Lost everything in there. My dad lost a 55 Chevrolet, matching number 67 Chevelle, big block 4-speed car. He lost a 70 Chevelle convertible SS car. Like it was a big deal. It was tragic on the family, right? So
Totally.
So
Yeah, because I mean, those are the types of cars that become heirlooms. Those are the types of cars that get passed down to you and your brother.
That's right. That's
you
right.
know,
That's right.
or your kids even with the Nova.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it kind of hurt, but moving on from that, nothing was insured. And so there was nothing we could do about anything in that shop. It was a total loss.
Yeah.
But that kind of humbled me in a way because I knew I had something cool there. And, maybe it was just in God's plan, maybe it wasn't meant to be. That was a 502 car, a really light Nova, big tires on the back. I mean, that might have been for me. And so it humbled me down to realize, let's slow it down. Let's do what we can. And after, the shop fire, I was, I'm turning 17 in that range, and we find a 1960 Bel Air. And that's when I decided, hey, let's give it a shot. It's baby blue. And that's actually what I drove to high school. As far as working on cars, I would help my dad a little bit, but I never would really just jump in. Mm-hmm. We had a guy that was local that would help my dad on everything. We called him Fat Boy. His name's Larry. And he was just the nicest guy on the planet, and he would help my dad. So I didn't want to step on any toes. I let him help, and I just watched, and when I say I'm hands on, when I'm there, the whole dad joke of holding the flashlight.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so that was me. Never got any tools thrown at me, thankfully, because I was paying attention. I was watching what they were doing.
Well, number one way to learn is hold a flashlight.
Oh, my gosh.
You'll find out real quick if you're not holding it in the right place.
You'll
find
know
out what an alternator is.
That's
you find
right.
out what a steering column looks like, or a U-joint, or
That's
a rag
exactly
joint. Or
it. Yep.
You'll find out quick because you got to hold the flashlight in the right place.
That's right. And so, my 60 Impala came around. We swapped around a 383 stroker, put a 700 in it, just so it was a little bit more convenient to drive. Drove that car to high school.
And this was your daily driver? Like, you didn't have anything else?
I had a 1996 Silverado extended cab, 4-wheel drive.
Come on.
I called it the Booger. Yep, I called it the Booger. It was metallic green, and I hated the truck at the time because I didn't know what they were going to become now.
Oh, yeah.
And I kicked myself. I literally kicked myself because if I could find that truck, I'd buy it in a heartbeat. I miss that truck so much. And, after I drove the 60 to high school, whenever that it was raining or something like that, I'd drive my old beater pickup. I got a lifted truck, started playing football. You know how it goes.
Yeah,
I got all that stuff. And so I kind of set the hot rods aside for a little while. I went, and I was being a teenager. You know how it is. And whenever we were graduating, I was telling you about my 69 Camaro. We got it. Needed a lot of work, but it is still a 1969 Camaro. So that is the nicest car I've got. It's black with white stripes. I still got that car. Yep. Yeah. And came in with a 350 and a busted 4-speed. There were a lot of issues, but the paint was clean. The interior was black leather. And so, it's a console car. It's a true SS car, but I always wanted the Hideaway RS headlights. I always and stuff like that. It still doesn't have those. Here I am,
grown
15
and making
years
money.
later, and here I am. I could probably do that, but I kind of set it aside. We did end up putting a 496 big block in it. Nope, I apologize. A 468 big block in it.
Yeah,
and nope. I was right. It is a 496 big block with a 5-speed.
So that's a 454 punched over some. I'm not going to ask you that because I can't even remember. Somebody will comment and let us know. But
I'll have to think about how that one was built. But Johnny Thomas, our engine builder, he done it. It used to be an old drag race motor. He turned it way down, took compression out of it. In a love truck, the little love truck that it was in was running 9s.
Whoa! Yeah.
And so it was a stout little motor. And you put it in a 69 Camaro with a 5-speed, and a teenager,
it's a recipe for disaster.
You got trouble. So, we turned it way down, dropped the compression down, stuff like that, changed the heads and all that. But, just basically turned it down for a cruiser. And that's actually the car that my wife drives the most now. If that car is being driven, my wife is in it. So,
very cool.
Yeah. And
so it's running, driving, looks like a car that you can just get in and go.
You can get in and go. It's got a little oil leak, but if you can dodge that, you're okay.
Yeah, if it's got oil in it, that means, or if it's leaking, what is it they say? If it's
leaking
oil, it's got oil in it.
Yeah. So, diving into that 69 Camaro, that's really, and that was senior year. That's when football was over. I dove into that car and I did the big block swap. A couple of my buddies jumped in and helped me out. And we got it running and I actually felt that successful feeling for the first time. And I was 18, I'd already moved out. I was going down to my dad's shop, working on the car, going back to my house, stuff like that. But when that car fired up, it struck something in me. And I realized what it is that catches all the guys and gals that are into cars. That this is the victory. Yeah. It's the hearing it roar. It's the initial startup and the knowing that you had a part of this, right? And so that's when then I started looking for a truck. I tried to buy my grandfather's truck that was left to my brother. I tried to buy it from him. He had a 5.3 for it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was ready. I was like, yes, please, 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 please.
Now let's pause on this truck.
Yep.
I want to just pause right here. So tell us about the truck, the C772 that was your granddad's that your brother now has.
Yep. So it is a 1967 C10. It's white, patina, like perfect. Yeah, like Teddy patina.
Short bed, long bed?
Short bed, step side. It's what you got.
Yeah.
And so, it was rough. It sat out in the backyard, and nobody thought twice about it because it was my brother's, and I was like, please, I begged, and he wouldn't let me have it. And looking back, it was meant to be. And so whenever that I finally located my truck, I'd saved my money, quit dipping, stuff like that. I was kind of growing into a man there, I thought. And so I bought that square body, my 85 C10. That was the first C10 that I'd ever purchased. I'd had a couple cars and a couple of lifted trucks by that point, but I like to trade and stuff like that, but I realized I get too attached. So if I'm going to get something, I want to make something of it. And so I got that truck. Jane and James Swafford, amazing people. So I still see them around town.
Oh, that's cool.
And so, they always make sure to come over and I take pictures with them every time. And so just a great family. And that was a 305 700 R4 truck. I went to buy it for $1,200, which is unheard of. On the way out,
especially today.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
And on the way out the driveway, she handed me $400, and she was like, "Please take care of it." She was like, "This is my dad's truck," and it's got a special place in my heart. Well, that warmed me up, and in my head when I was looking at it, I was like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna bag this thing. We're gonna paint it white." Your always favorite square body stuff. And so whenever she told me that, I was like, "All right, you know what? I'll just keep this paint." I wasn't really. I didn't know much about it. I just knew it wasn't perfect, and I was okay with that. And that's kind of where that Blake with Sweet Patina jumped in. That really whenever that. So I lowered that truck down, drove it to work, drove it to college, all this stuff. And that 305 went out, the 700. Of course, the 700 R4 goes. And the 305 lasted longer than the 700, I'll give it that. And so we actually ended up putting a 383 stroker in that truck with a built 700. We struggled with it. Finally, I finally got a 700 that would hold up to that 383. Well, whenever that I finally found a transmission that would hold up, I already had the 9-inch, so it was posi. We already knew what was going to happen there. So I started really twisting on the truck, and I mean I lowered it. That was the first thing I did, so it was already pretty stable. Well, I started ripping on the truck and getting a good feel for it. Well, I kind of got a name around town, hey, this kid can drive. I've never been a drifter. I can't drift.
Yeah, that's something that is beyond my expertise. For sure.
That is a skill that I don't hold. Yeah. And so, I realized whenever that I was pulling that 305 out, my dad came. So let's back up to where I was pulling 305 out of that truck. It started smoking, wouldn't pull real well, like dangerous pulling into traffic, kind of slow. And I just loved the truck, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to toss this 383 in. It's not doing anything. It's been in a couple cars around the shop, and let's just try it out. Well, my dad walks in when I'm literally yanking the motor out in his shop, and he walks in. He goes, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm pulling this motor out. It's bad." He's like, "It's not bad. It's fine." Trying to talk me out of it. And I was like, and it kind of hurt my feelings because I was like, "Dang, he doubts me. He doubted me that I could do this."
Yeah.
And I think that drove me further. It drove me. I was like, I can do this. And so, I pulled it out. Me and a couple of my buddies, we pulled that out, put the 383 in. By the time I finally got it right, it was, I had sunk all this money into it that I wasn't expecting and all that. So a gentleman walked up and he offered me money for the 383 and 700. And I was already looking into the LS stuff. It was starting to come around, but not popular yet. And so, all that to say that he ended up buying that motor, and he helped me pull it that night.
Very cool.
So he bought that setup, and that's where the LS platform came from.
So you got the 305 out. You go to put the 383 in. You do that, right?
I do that.
Yeah, your dad helps you get that done.
So he walked away. He did not help me. That was the first thing he's ever walked away on me on.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I think it was just kind of a trust factor. He's like, we'll see if he can actually do it. Because I told him, I was like, I can do this. I've seen you do it enough. And so I ended up actually selling that 383. The truck ran great, melting tires around the house.
Yeah.
And,
how long was the 383 in the truck, you think?
I'd say probably 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
It enough to make a name for itself.
Yeah.
I never posted it. I never posted it for sale. A guy just walked up at it. He walked up to me at a car show, and he's actually from South Georgia.
Yeah.
And he walked up at a car show up in Dahlonega or Dawsonville at the Moonshine Festival.
Yep.
And he's like, man, this thing looks pretty good. How's it run? I was like, it's okay. He's like, you mind taking me for a ride for it when the show's over? I was like, no, man, come on back.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll go do burnouts. And so he came back and he was like, man, would you sell it? I was like, yeah, I'll probably sell it. I want to do an LS. I'd really like to try that out. I don't know anything about it, so we'll just try it. And he was like, if you'll take so-and-so, he's like, I hope you pull it tonight. Well, sure enough, he followed me to the house, and we pulled it that night.
No kidding.
He took it to South Georgia with him that night.
Man was serious.
Motor, and I think he actually left the transmission, and one of my buddies bought it from me. So
very cool.
And there comes a 604 L80.
Well, what year range was this? Like, what time frame you think?
That'd have been probably 2015.
Okay, yeah.
Yep, somewhere in that ballpark.
So you owned the truck for about 3 years. You bought the truck in 2012.
Yep.
Owned the truck for about 3 years, and now you're like, I want to LS this thing.
It's time for an LS.
Yeah. So tell me about that.
So, and it might have actually been 2014. But yeah, so bought the 6.0, bought the 4L80 as a combo deal. Sean Henderson, he's a local guy. He sells a lot of LSs, stuff like that. Very trusted guy with him. And so I reached out to him and went and picked it up cash. The cash I just got for my motor and transmission, went and picked it up, spent all my money again. And again, I'm like 22 now, still barely getting by.
Yeah.
I'm working 5 days a week, but the money is being spent before I can save it. And so, I'm trying to collect money, stuff like that. And I get this motor and I'm like, I'm just going to pull it apart. We're going to see what happens. Well, when I got into it, the middle cam bearing, just like always, middle cam bearing is stuck. And so I'm like, okay, I finally get the cam out and the cam bearing pops out with it. And I was like, oh, great. So I get in there and I have to, beat the cam bearing apart to where I can get it out of the motor. And it was going to be a cam swap, right? Just a simple thing. I got even further into it and one of the lifters was stuck. So I was like, okay, it is what it is. And Sean actually reimbursed a majority of my money and helped me cover to fix that, as just a buddy thing.
Yeah.
Great guy. Again, I'll say that for him. He really stepped in when I needed somebody. So, he backed me up, and I actually took it to Johnny Thomas. He builds my dad's racing motors, a lot of the local motors around the house, and he actually punched that out to a 416 stroker. And it wasn't
Big
expected.
Boy time.
That's exactly it. I was looking for a 370 or a 408. And Johnny called me one day at work. He's like, hey, I have bad news. I was like, all right, what's that? He said, we can't get the pistons in for this 408. I was like, all right, what's our options? He said, we can only go to a 416. I said, well, what's the bad news?
Yeah, this all sounds great.
Yeah. And
thinner cylinder walls?
That's right.
That's really it.
That's right. And that's what he said. He said we would have to go 70 over on that motor to make them work.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? It is what it is. I said, let's do it. I said, we're this deep. Let's just do it. And so, fast forwarding, got that motor running, took it to my buddy Lance Dish Room. He got it dialed in. We drove around the mountains up in Dawsonville and Dahlonega. I mean, we wouldn't start tuning on it until after work, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we'd start tuning on that thing about 9:00, and we got questioned by a cop sitting at Lance's church. We pulled in to kind of dial it in a little bit, and a cop pulled in about 1:00 in the morning. Was like, "Hey, what you guys doing?" And here we are in a square body with a 4L80 and a 416 stroke. He knew what we were doing.
Oh yeah.
And so he
just a little test and tune, no
just
problem.
a little. That's it. Just tuning it in. And
That's
so.
Right.
Lance got it dialed in, and we never touched that tune again for 6 years. Never touched the truck again. I changed the plugs a few times, just because I thought that's what I was supposed to be doing. Blah.
Yeah.
And you are, preventive maintenance, stuff like that. Change the oil, change the plugs, kind of update it. I put over 70,000 miles on that motor with his tune on it. Everything went well.
Man.
So we lead up to the California thing with the Hoonigan guys.
Yeah.
I go out to Hoonigan, and that's where I really just gave that motor all it had. I mean, literally 3.5, 4 minutes straight. And like I was telling you in the truck, there could have been 10 people in there with me and couldn't have pried my foot off that floorboard.
I love it.
I was so just so amped up, and the guys were all hyped, and I was hyped, and I was like, nope. Well, when that thing finally shut off and rolled to a stop, like I was telling you, my foot was still on the floor. I mean, pressure
adrenaline.
On the floor. I mean, holding it, and the truck was not even running. And so I finally get out, and I get home, and I evaluate everything, and I'm like, look, like, why, if I'm going to be driving like this, like now people are going to know who I am. They're going to expect burnouts. I was like, instead of fixing this 416, why don't I just try out this turbo stuff and just get an old junkyard 6.0?
So that's a great point, and one I actually didn't connect before. The 416 was all NA.
All NA.
No power adder at all.
Zero.
Yeah,
that's right.
And I guess that's probably a pretty common thing on a motor that's built like that. I guess because you're just trying to get higher compression.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yep. Compression is free horsepower as long as you can supply it with the fuel.
Yeah, and hold it all together.
That's right. And keep it cool. So, there comes the turbo idea. And I put a random 6.0 that I had laying around in it. And, I actually popped that one on Power Tour. I had it running for about a week. And we did a gender reveal for my little boy, left out for Power Tour like 3 days later. And I mean, like, I had it running like 4 days.
Yeah.
And left out for Power Tour, drove it all the way up to, I think it started somewhere in Ohio that year. And it was so loud. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I had 4-inch exhaust that just dumped out under the floor. Like it was just nothing. I just rushed it. Lance had just a bench tune in it, we didn't have it dialed in. I just left. I mean, he literally had me a startup tune, and I was like, okay, we're on 7 pounds. We're going to go.
Yep.
Well, I actually had, between 2 hotels in St. Louis, I had engine failure that had nothing to do with the turbo. I just had a rod bearing go out.
Yeah.
It was just time. Motor didn't get hot, but when that rod bearing went, you better believe that oil pressure went with it.
I bet it did.
So my buddy Twig, he actually left home. Andrew Thomas, he's like my little brother, and he left home. That when I called him, he left home, and I rented a car, went to the final stop on the Power Tour, ran all the way back to that hotel, and we pulled in at the red light at the same exact time.
You're kidding.
Yeah. So
how cool is that?
So timing is pretty awesome right there. But we pulled it home. And I looked over in the corner, and I had this old, just wore-out 6-liter that I traded one of my buddies for some wheels and tires. He had no money in it, and I didn't have any money in the wheels and tires, and he wanted them. So I was like, "What do you want for that? What do you want for that motor over there?" He's like, "I don't know, man. It's got, I don't know how many miles are on it, but I know the odometer was over 300,000." And I was like, "It is what it is. We'll trade around.
It's an LS. It'll be fine.
We have no money in it. Let's give it a shot." Well, that motor's been in the truck for almost 4 years now.
Wow.
And my stepdaughter helped me kind of build it. Whenever I got back from Power Tour, I looked over at that motor, and that's all it took. I started pulling parts off of it. Well, I pulled everything out of the motor that I had just blown up. I pulled the oil pump that was full of metal, ran oil through it, spun it around until I quit seeing glitter, and put it in this motor here.
Oh, my gosh. That is awesome.
It's just, stuff like that, just trying to save money. I reused the ARP head bolts from that 6-liter over to this one here.
Yeah.
I changed over the heads. The other one had 317s. Well, I ran across some 243s off Marketplace,
And that's that's an LS6 head? Is that what a 243 is? Yeah.
Yes, it is. Or LS2. It can come on the GTO, stuff like that too. So, I found I scored a set of 243s off Marketplace for dirt cheap. Guy didn't tell me much about them. Didn't care. They were $150.
Yeah.
And so
that's
I was
a gamble
okay,
worth taking.
yeah, you're exactly right. And I had a Holly high rise sitting over there, and I was like, let's just do this. And so my stepdaughter was home with me that day, and we blew that other motor apart. And then one day we pulled that motor out, all the internals out. I had a sloppy stage 2 cam just sitting on the shelf. We literally threw this motor together in about 1 hour, maybe 2. I didn't even paint it. I always try to paint motors at least black.
So we just pulled that one out of Teddy recently and put a cam in it. We've got our own little signature cam going with Tick now, which is awesome. Mad respect to Sloppy and Sloppy Mechanics and all they do, because, man, they make a great cam for especially a really good value. You and many other people I know have had such great success with them. But
that's right.
We pulled our little junkyard 5.3 out of the 68 we've got, put the UBT Tick cam in it, and I should have painted it, but I stuck it right back in. And it's just one of those things where it's like, I just want to get going. I just want to get it back in there and get going.
That's right.
And make sure I don't have anything else that's going to, I'm going to run into and disrupt my process of getting back on the road.
It's just something you don't think about.
Yeah. Hey guys, it's time for the Action Line History segment brought to you by Auto Metal Direct. Auto Metal Direct has been a long-time supporter of United by Trucks, and I'm so happy that they're helping us out with this segment of the podcast now through the end of the year. So I wanted to tell you guys the reason we named the Action Line podcast what we did is because I love 67 to 72 trucks, and that's what GM named the trucks when they started to roll off the assembly line and started to break out all the marketing materials for the trucks in 1967. They called them Action Line pickups, and I just thought that was super cool, so I wanted to name the podcast that. So I did. But this podcast is not all about the history of those trucks, those specific trucks. It's obviously, as I mentioned in the beginning, about all sorts of things that relate to classic trucks and how others got started and with their passion in classic trucks, my own passion, and then obviously talking about, the shenanigans that I have with a lot of my friends who revolve around UBT. So I wanted to point out in every single episode a history segment that you guys could learn a little bit about the 6772 trucks, and I could even learn a little bit more. And I've got one today, the first one, and we're calling it No Lights or Marker Lights. This is a question I get asked so much about the 67 to 72 trucks. Why do some have marker lights or reflectors and some don't in the fenders and in the bedsides? So I've got the answer today, and I'm going to share some of this with you. I got this directly from the rulemaking by the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard Rulemaking number 108. Got some additional information from the 67 to 72 ChevyTrucks.com forum, which I absolutely love. This is the forum that got me started on these trucks. If you're interested in classic truck forums or automotive forums, this one's still alive. You should go check it out, 67 to 72 ChevyTrucks.com. And then a little bit of information from the Hagerty history of Chevrolet pickup trucks and their buyer's guide. So let's jump in. In 1967, as part of the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, lamps, reflective devices, and associated equipment rulemaking number 108 by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, otherwise known as NHTSA, reflectors were mandated effective January 1st, 1968. According to the NHTSA, the purpose of side marker lights is to enable a driver to see another vehicle that is approaching at an angle at night, and to see it early enough that the driver can stop in time to prevent a collision or at least slow down to reduce the severity of the collision. It's important to note that a 1980 study by the NHTSA under DOT found that the addition of side markers in that 12-year period had reduced nighttime accidents by 16%. So I'd say that the side marker rulemaking, while I think it's much cleaner on the 67 trucks that have no side markers, it clearly achieved its mission. So I want to put a fine point on this. I've got a little more history here, and then we'll jump back into the interview with Trevor. But I want to be clear that in 1967, the first year of the 67 to 72 Chevy trucks had no side markers in the front fenders or reflectors, and had no side markers or reflectors in the bedsides. In 1968, they did change those to a reflector only, and then by 1969, those had changed over to an actual light that had wiring and a bulb and socket and all that would go with it. So let's jump back into this history real quick before we jump back into the interview. So why does this matter to the classic truck enthusiast? When GM designed and began producing the 1967 C10, the government had no side marker requirement. However, when production began on the 1968 model trucks, a rulemaking by the NHTSA had already been enacted, declaring that all vehicles manufactured for the 1968 model year had to have reflectors. The same rulemaking was upgraded to require lighted side markers for the 1969 model year. As you can imagine, GM scrambled to meet the requirements, but the 68 model was already out with no place for a fender marker light or a reflector. So according to most accounts, they simply cut a hole and installed a reflector only. Since they knew eventually they had to have the light, they molded the plastic on the reflector to be easily modified for a light bulb socket. Hence the reason the 68 reflector looks like someone forgot to cut a hole for the light on the back of the reflector. They cut the hole in the reflector for the 69 model and included a harness, etc., to meet the updated rulemaking. Interestingly, the law only referred to front marker requirements. So I did not know this when I was doing this research. The law only referred to the front marker requirements. GM put the rear marker on the outside of the bedside only on there for continuity of design, which big nod to GM. I've seen some trucks that don't have the marker on the bedside but have them in the front fenders. Definitely looks a little off, but I love that GM made that design decision quickly and included them on both the front fender and the bedside. So in closing, the 67 C10 had no reflector or side marker light for in the front fender or in the bedside. In 68, they started to get a reflector, and in 69 and up, they actually got a full functioning marker light. Want to tell you guys, if you're interested in getting some metal, getting the correct metal for your 67 or 68 and up build, you can head over to autometaldirect.com. They have 67 specific sheet metal with smooth front fenders with no marker light and smooth bedsides with no marker light. And then obviously they have the 68 and up with the marker light or reflector provision included in the bedside. So head over to autometaldirect.com for all your sheet metal needs. And I got to tell you, they are expanding their catalog all the time with all sorts of parts for the 6772 trucks, square bodies, classic cars. They had literally, Ford trucks, they literally have a plethora of parts for your classic car or truck build. So head over to autometaldirect.com.
So I got a set of the 243 heads off Marketplace, scored those for about $150, which is like what dreams are made of.
Yep.
And so, I just had them sitting there, the sloppy stage 2 cam. I know you'd mentioned the tick cam that you got, and whenever that, it just all kind of went together. And Haley, my stepdaughter, she actually slid the cam in that motor like that. She had done it for me before, but that one was a little special. And we put that motor together with intentions that it's going to last a week.
Yeah.
And here we are, literally 4 years later, and right after we got that one put in, of course I'm out on the same tune. Like, didn't even tell Lance that I changed anything out. I just start ripping because I was like, it doesn't matter. I have no money in this motor. And so if it popped, it just popped. I didn't care. John Tessier's transmission is still holding up like a champ. That Circle D converter, man, I can't even, like, even what you just felt when we were cruising.
Yes.
I mean, it's just right.
It is. I agree.
And that torque converter has almost 90,000 miles on it right now. If that tells you, and my miles, not just normal miles.
Yeah, right. That's beating on it miles.
That's rough miles. And so, can't speak enough of them. But whenever I finally got that truck running, it ripped. I mean, ripped. And I was like, holy smokes, this thing's pretty fast now. Never took it to the track. I was a little bit, I need to get this thing to Lance before we really start ripping on it. Well, we put it on the dyno on pump gas on 7 pounds, and it made 522 at the wheels.
Love it.
We left off the dyno that day making over 800 wheel horsepower. We got to about 650 on pump gas, and we drained the fuel tank, put E85 in it. It's got all the flex fuel, all that stuff. Another one of those things, buy once, cry once.
That's right.
Went ahead and did all that. And that Terminator, the Terminator X Max Ascendant is prepped for it. It's got all the inputs, outputs. You're ready for whatever. Well, Lance hooked me up with a Mac valve and all that stuff so that we could electronically adjust the boost. Well, and we started adjusting all that boost and with the E85. So on pump gas, on 12 pounds, we did the same exact tune, didn't change a thing. He just swapped the fuel and the tune over to E85. Mm-hmm. It made 706 at the wheels. So we jumped almost 60 wheel horsepower on E85, right?
Just by changing the fuel source.
And he gets all excited. He's like, all right, let's get us a street tune ready. Well, he's dynoing, and you can just hear it. You just hear it starting to come to life. I'm like, oh my gosh! Like my goal was 650, and we did that with pump gas, safely, and then keep in mind this is
so 650. You did that probably on what pound? What pound of boost? 12. Okay, so 650, 12 pounds
on 93 octane.
Man,
it healthy.
That's so crazy.
Very healthy. Yeah, on a stock 6 liter. I actually put back in the factory push rods and rocker arms.
I've done that too.
I'm running LS rocker arms and push rods in that thing. I didn't upgrade.
Factory length.
Factory everything. Did not change a thing. And so Lance didn't know that, so here we go ripping on this thing. On 14 pounds, it made 760 at the wheel, and that's the one that is the same tune you just rode in with me.
Wow.
And it rips.
It's crazy though that just in the seat, I mean, you can feel the raw power.
Yeah.
But that truck's not scary out of control. It doesn't feel like you're just gonna slide off in the ditch.
That's right.
I think it's got an amazing amount of wheel speed for one thing.
It has wheel speed.
Yeah, and it is like, but it's not like sling you out to either side wheel speed. You mat the gas, it just burns them off, and you kind of keep going.
That's pretty much
straight,
it. That's right. Yeah, and pulling the trailers, stuff like that. That's the same tune that I pull the trailers with. That's the one where that I can just roll out 20, 30, 60. It doesn't matter, whatever mile an hour, and it will just hold it. It will just hold that mile per hour until the wheel speed hits 1 foot. So third gear, what we were just in, when it bounces rev limiter. Speaking of wheel speed, that is 151 miles an hour in third gear.
Wow.
Exact on Lance's dyno, and it registered on my Dakota Digital. Everything that should register read the exact same, so you can kind of trust it at that point.
Absolutely.
And so when we found the Healthy Street tune, Lance was tickled to death with it. Everything read really good. And I want to go back to Snake Eater Injectors. That's who does my all of my fuel injection stuff. Those guys actually sent me those injectors to try them out.
That's cool.
And
where are they out of?
They
I'm not
are out
familiar
of
with
Texas,
them.
I believe.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, and when they go to LS Fest, I get to park with them. All the cool stuff. The cool group of dudes. And so, whenever we, going back to that, and Lance was explaining to me how the injector cycle, and it has twin 525 fuel pumps in the tank and all that good stuff. So, he was expressing to me that we have a lot left on the table. And so we put 14 pounds to it. Nope, we put 16 pounds to it and got to 822 wheel horsepower.
My goodness.
So it's just
an 85 C10 with a stock 6.0, essentially.
That's it.
With GM factory GM heads and a sloppy Sage 2.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
And what size is this turbo?
It is a VS Racing 8096. It'd be considered their. At the time, I think it was their first gen S480.
Okay,
is what it would have been.
Yep.
Bought it on Black Friday. Here we go with the
pinching pennies.
Pinching pennies, but I had to. Didn't have a choice. I was just trying to build a truck the cheapest I could and hang with all the guys that are going fast. And we ended up putting a 18-pound tune in it. We ran it a time or two, kind of spun a little bit on the dyno. We're getting some inaccurate readings, and so we turned it back down to 16. And just because we weren't running into anything showing up on the computer, but our numbers were fluctuating on the dyno, and we didn't want to mess anything up as far as drive shaft, our wheel speed sensor, anything like that. So we just kind of left it there, and I asked him, I was like, how high can we turn this? He said, well, what all's done to the motor? I literally did not even tell him that it was a stock 6-liter, and I told him, I was like, this is more stock than the original 6.0 that we had done in it the first time that you just sent me a little bench tune on. He said, let's call it at 16 pounds, he said, and try to only use that one at the track, run around on one of the lighter ones, he said, but on E85 you should be good. And
now you exclusively run this truck on E85.
I do.
So when we were in it, it was on E85. It put the tune put 706 or 760?
760 at the
760 to the wheels. On what pound of boost?
That'd be 14.
That's 14.
Yep.
And you just run around on the street. I mean, it is just a beautiful thing.
That's what I drive across the country with.
It's so cool, man. That is so rad. Well, I think you're showing me, and you're probably showing a lot of others, and have already shown a lot of others, what you can do with a budget type performance focused build. I mean, and still have a classic C10 that looks like a classic C10.
Just like it was.
This truck is on Steelies and caps and thin white walls and a good stance, but man, it looks period correct. It looks like a good looking square body. Before, I know we're gonna have to go here in just a minute, but before we do, I want to switch gears just a tad. And as someone who has had a bunch of different trucks, I've never owned a bunch of different classic cars or anything. And you've had at least access to a bunch of different classic cars and trucks, or own them yourself.
Yep.
I remember I think you even had a twin turbo Nova that we'll have to come back and talk about at some point in time. But what is a car that you wish you had back? The number one car that you wish you had back? You could even not one that you own now, but it's one that got away from you.
Yeah, so the Nova you just mentioned, it was a 4.8 big single turbo. That's the one that got away.
Okay. Yeah, I
it,
mistook that. I misremembered that, thinking it was a twin turbo. But it was a 4.8 single turbo car.
6-speed car.
Yeah.
And I went and got that car out of North Georgia, like in the mountains, Rome area, somewhere like that, and brought it back, and that car ripped. That was a fast car. And with it being a 6-speed, it made it 10 times more fun than it ever should have been.
Yeah.
That 4.8 was holding, 25, 30 pounds of boost. And so to really realize what that thing was doing, well, the guy, he mentioned he was like, keep it on E85, if you have to run it on pump gas, just try not to hold in it real long. Well, here I am on pump gas, and I blow the snot out of it. I blew the motor up.
Just not listening. Just doing what you want.
I was just doing what I wanted. You know how it is. And so, I'm probably 26, 27 by this time. And so I actually reached out to Lance. I was like, hey, man, I hurt the motor, and I really hurt that motor. Like it's not fixable. I bent the crank. I did all kinds of crazy stuff. And so that motor's currently in the shop. Well, I reached out to Lance. I was like, hey, man, do you have any 4.8s just laying around? He was like, yeah, I actually do. I bought that motor from him for like $500, I think.
4-point great.
4-point great.
Yeah.
And so I actually turned the boost up. I was like, we're going to see how long we can make this one last. Sloppy stage 2 cam. Here we go again. I pulled the heads off the other motor, put them right over back on it. And so I take this car out for the first rip. Didn't change the tune or anything.
Yeah.
And this car is running twice as good as it was before. And so we're just ripping up and down the road, and I take it over to the dyno, and the first pull on that car on like whatever it was making, and it was pretty fat, which in terms of fuel, you want it a little bit fat. When you start leaning on them, you're pushing them a little too hard.
Yep.
And so, it was just a real fat E85 tune for a 4.8 liter with a 6-speed. And the first dyno pull I think we made was like 740, 750. Yeah. And it's got all the adjustable suspension. Like it's kind of like a race car. My wife made me put a cage in it. She didn't like that it was a ripper.
Yeah.
And I put a little drag pack on it, just something. And I could not run a street tire. I couldn't get the car to stay on the ground. Yeah. I mean, that car was all over the place.
Yeah.
And so I put a little 255 6015 radial. I mean, a tiny radial on that car. And it would literally pull the driver tire running 40 miles an hour down the street.
No kidding.
That car would not chirp a tire when I put that radial on it.
Wow.
And it ripped. And I posted it for sale. I found a 1960 Impala that I liked. And I still have that car. It's a 4-door. I call it my crew cab Impala.
Crew cab, yeah.
And it's for me and the kid. The whole family can jump in it. We haven't used it like I wanted to as much as I thought we would, but I posted that Nova for sale, and a guy came down from Indianapolis, and he bought the car for exactly what I was asking. Didn't even try to talk me down on it. I had a lot of people talking to me about it, but that car right there is the one that got away, because just the overall fun factor of having 750 to 800 horsepower in a stick shift in a car that weighs about 3,200 pounds, that was a monster. Now, fast? No, it was a stock T56, stuff like that. Eric from Tick Performance, we'll go back to Tick Performance.
Yeah.
He reached out when I had that car, and he's like, dude, we can make it fast. He's like, we can make it fast.
Those boys know T56s for sure.
They do. And he actually hooked me up with a monster clutch, some of the setups that they got there, but I just couldn't afford one of their T56s. And looking back, if I would have been able to do that car would still be in my driveway.
I love it.
And so,
did you ever take it to the track? Did you ever run it down a drag strip or anything?
I did, and every time I did, I ran into issues Eric told me I'd have out of that T56. It would lock me out of third gear, but the fastest pass I ever made, that I personally made in that car, the dude that had it before me, he was a driver. His name's Bailey Middleton.
Yeah.
And that dude is a driver. Everything he has is a stick shift. And he would run in all those no prep stuff and all that stuff with that car, because he had a drag pack for it too. And man, he was in the deep, like he was almost running 5s in the 8th in that car. I mean like a fast. No roll cage, no seat belts. Let me emphasize that again.
No sir.
He is in the deep 6s. Like I think he might have ran a 6.0 once or twice.
Wow.
And wicked fast car. And he's a driver, man. He's a driver. And so I got the car, and I was like, yeah, well, I weigh twice as much as he does. Yep. He's a skinny guy. So here I am, a big burly mountain man. And I crawl in this thing, and the fastest I ever actually got it at the track, because I either had hooking issues, I would dump the clutch, and I wouldn't build the right boost like I was supposed. Clutches and turbos they don't G and haul well with me.
And it's a whole different element when when you don't just mash and go.
It is.
When you're clutch shift gears.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm not experienced with it all, but I can only imagine.
Yeah, it's a lot more science to it whenever that you look into it, and
which makes me respect somebody like Hoonigan to a whole different level. What he's done with blasphemy, that's a totally different game right there.
He's an animal behind the wheel
for
too.
sure.
And so, I think the fastest pass that I ever had, and I never could hit third gear. Driving on the street, I'd hit third gear every time. I never missed it.
Yeah.
But on the track, I don't know if it was the grip, if possibly something under the car was twisting because it was pulling so hard. But I think I hit third gear one time, and I did a lot of roll racing, like a streetcar takeover. I went to semifinals in streetcar takeover in the 130 roll racing class.
Oh, nice.
And everybody thought I was sandbagging because I wasn't accurate. That was because I was missing gears and still trying to keep up. It was just a rowdy car, and it was hard to drive.
Yeah.
And so I think the fastest pass that I ever made was like an 11.0 in the car in the quarter.
That's moving.
And I trapped like 136. So the mile per hour was there.
Yeah.
But as far as the shifting and getting it to, you couldn't quick shift. I couldn't quick shift the car.
Yeah, lots of room for improvement.
Bailey was really good at it, but I never could get it. And so, learning the car and all that stuff, and I just had, I had a 2-year-old, I had a toddler, or about to be 2 years old, and my wife was pregnant, and I was like, we really need something for the family, and here we go into all that, and I was like, let's just get this crew cab, this crew cab Impala. And so I sold that car, bought the Impala, still have it, but if I could go back in time, I would have just saved my money to buy that car and would have saved the Nova.
I love it. What, just real quick, what do you think the future is for, let's pick the truck. Do you have anything that you really want to do to this 85 C10? Is there something you can share with our audience that, might be coming down the road, but, just a quick, like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this.
Yeah, so the 416 from Hoonigan, and nobody knows this, so this is the first time anybody's going to hear about this, but the 416 that I had out at Hoonigan, it's made a return. It went to Johnny Thomas. It's making a return. I don't know if it's going to land in the C10 or not, but the only real future for that truck is, if I go anything more than what it's got, I already need a cage. I'm already running 1020s, 1030s in this truck at 140 miles an hour.
Yeah, man, that's moving without a cage.
And so the tune that you just rode in on the power tour, we pulled into Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Yep.
On the power tour, very first day, I literally pull into the show, swap my tires out, go to the track, didn't change the tune, nothing. Just as I drove it up there, and it went at 1043 at 137. And I was like, okay, that's the fastest it's ever been on the street tune. And, of course, I go turning it up, and then I spin, this stuff like that. But I'm already well into roll cage territory.
Yep.
And so, putting more power to the truck is not going to help me per se, because you start, what's the difference in a 999 and a 10.0 is 1 mile an hour, basically.
Yeah.
And, just basically getting off the line, I firmly believe 9s are in this setup now.
That's cool.
It just takes a little bit more seat time. So, but I would honestly say if I had to choose as far as my next step, it'll be putting the old motor back in the truck, stuff like that. But as of right now, we're gonna lean on this old junkyard motor until we can't lean on it anymore.
Get you a cage in there. That'd be a good idea.
I just hate to cut up a factory looking truck.
I know, that's true. That's true.
So just so that I've never cut, the truck's never been cut. It's not even C-notched.
Oh, really? That truck doesn't even have a C-notch in it?
It's never been cut.
Wow.
So for me...
Yeah, I can understand where you'd be coming from. I thought it had a C-notch in it.
No, there's no C-notch in that truck.
Wow.
Zero. Not a single piece of metal is missing off that truck.
Man.
Yeah, no
Trevor,
holes.
you have such an interesting history around, in your short life. I mean, 33 years old. I look back on that now. I'm like, man, I wish I was 33 again. And I'm only 8 years older than you, or 7 years older, 8 years older. But you have done so much and have such a rich history, probably because of your dad and because of your friends and the people you surround yourself with. But when it comes to hot rods and classic trucks, I think it's very, very cool. We're going to have you back on because we are just breaking the ice here, like just scratching the surface. I think we could probably talk for another 2 or 3 hours about this. But I really appreciate your time today, man, and we'll catch back up with you soon.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Sweet. UBT's Action Line podcast is a production of UBT Media.